in long-term relationships, it had less to do with who you chose and more to do with what you built, what the kind of relationship the two of you built. And so since my focus is so much on what can be built, like this person shows up like this person shows up like this, they're two unique human beings. They have told me that they want to have a relationship together. They don't know how the fuck to do that. They need some help. So I help them see how these two completely unique human beings, complex, quirky, unique human beings, how they can create a, a completely unique relationship never seen before on the planet that is built around them and who they actually are so they can be their authentic selves and have a great relationship.
Hey there, welcome back to Good for the Hive, the podcast where I get to speak to some inspiring guests to share their life lessons and take a look at the question, what is a good life? This week's guest, Ken Blackman, is a relationship mindset coach and an intimacy expert. Ken is now in his 25th year of helping couples co-create fulfilling, thriving relationships and what he calls a gourmet love life. We talk all about Ken's tips if you were to approach the modern day dating scene, how you maintain a healthy, loving relationship once you've eventually found the one. And I also asked Ken, how do you rekindle what he calls a gourmet love life after you've been with the same partner for many, many years? Just asking for a friend. Ken actually asked me what level of spiciness I wanted to go for in this episode. And suffice it to say, he does not have lemon and herb advice in his arsenal whatsoever. If you enjoy the conversation, please do give it a like and share. And if you're new around here, do subscribe. All the new likes and subs help us to continue to grow and attract inspiring guests just like Ken. Let's jump into the episode. Ken Blackman, welcome to the podcast.
So good to be here. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Appreciate it. Ken, let's jump in where we always jump in and ask you, what is a good life to you?
Wow, that's a good question. A good life, I would say, is one that has purpose, one that has enjoyment, certainly one that has connection with other human beings. I think if you've got those things, then you're covered for what I would consider a good life.
And connection is coming up a lot in what I'm seeing in recent data and everything. It seems like a real pinch point, a real important part of happiness comes from connection to other people, connection sometimes to spirit and to spirituality and that sort of thing. But connection is getting mentioned more and more as I talk to people, experts just like yourself.
Yeah. And there's a lot of what living a good life is that I think is important and that I'm learning about as a human being, but that I haven't chosen as my area, my domain of expertise where I help other people. And connection is that domain that I've kind of chosen for myself because I was kind of a loner when I was younger and didn't really appreciate the value of human connection, but also felt very lonely and alone and isolated. And when I started to learn how to have connection with people, it was so transformative for me. I thought, this is the kind of work I want to do. Like, I was a software engineer, and that was a good life in so many ways. There was a particular area of my life where I didn't feel like I was very skilled, which was in intimate relating with a partner. And like I said, as I learned how to do that well, I thought, this is actually what I want to do for other people. Like, I want other people to have what I have. And I could see just this kind of, it's much worse now than it was even when I was younger, but this epidemic of just people being isolated and not really experiencing substitutes for human connection rather than the nutrient of human connection. So yeah, super important.
And what was the turning point for you personally? Was there a rock bottom as such? Was there something that made you say, I can't do this anymore? I need to reevaluate things.
I think so. So picture a software engineer, successful, had a good life, was making decent money, like six figures at that time. I'm 60 now. So six figures when I was in my 20s was a decent income. I was working at Apple, had friends, did lots of things. I mountain biked and did karate and did skydiving in the summers and hung out with my friends and played video games. And there was a lot of stuff. There was a lot of things that were kind of fulfilling in a superficial way, but there was like this one area of my life where I didn't really know how to relate with the opposite sex. My preferred intimate partner is the opposite sex, and I had no idea how to connect with women. Like I was shy. I was multiple things at the same time. I was shy. I was also codependent. I was also misogynistic. I was all this mix of things that were all in the way of connecting. And I mean, you can't really tell from when I'm on video, but I'm not a tall human being. I'm 5'0". And so I didn't consider myself particularly attractive. I wasn't athletic or I mean, I had money, but that wasn't going to be a factor in me finding people. So I really needed to learn. I believed that I was hopelessly unattractive. And that turned out not to be true. Like I thought, there's no way anyone's going to love me. I'm at the bottom of the list of men that women would choose. That turned out to not be true at all. I actually
Mm.
needed to do a lot of work on myself and learn how to connect at a human to human level. When I stopped seeing women as just objects of like kind of like a video game, like what's the buttons I need to push in order to get the reward, you know what I mean? And started actually connecting with them as human beings. I'm oversimplifying, but working on myself, how I feel about myself, because I think how you feel about yourself tends to impact how other people feel about you. You kind of broadcast how people should feel about you. So between that and learning how to have this thing, we haven't defined it yet, but this thing called human connection, you know, started to change my relationships with women and was so transformative for me as a human being. That's kind of the origin story, if you will, of how I got
Mm.
to where I am now. I left my job, I left my career and said, I want to learn how to.
You've jumped in on my first question perfectly. So, one of the first things I found when I was looking online, when I knew I'd be speaking with you, was the sentence, you should aim to get healthy before you get married, with respect
Mhm.
of sort out your own shit, know who you are truly before you go out
Mhm.
and try and find someone else. How much do you agree with that? I mean, that sounds like what you were saying in a nutshell.
Um, I, it's funny. I fully agree with that. I think it can be taken to an extreme where people feel like they have to wait until they're perfect in order to be like, I don't want to feed that monster of you're not good enough. You have lots of work to do before you can even worry about it. But I do think let me put it this way. There are a lot of issues that we tend to think are going to be solved by having a partner. And it's those things that you can't like, you know, this is the advice that I give. Make a list of the problems that you have right now. The problems like your issues, whether it's I don't have enough income, or whether it's I'm lonely, or whether it's any of those things. Like make a list of the problems that your future partner is the solution to. Those are the things you should start to work on within yourself to
Mm.
so that it's not like these are the things you've already made your future partner responsible for and you haven't even met them yet, right? Like this is the burden you are planning on dumping onto them so that they are the solution to all these problems. And so like if you don't know how to be happy, you won't know how to be happy in relationship. If you don't know how to be fulfilled, you won't know how to be fulfilled in relationship. So that's how I think about it. Like there was lots of stuff I needed to work on within myself that I was putting on some woman who was going to make me feel blah, 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 blah. And those were all, it's funny. I'll give you an example. So this is what would happen to me. I would get into a relationship. Now, mind you, I have low self-esteem in this scenario, right? I have low self-esteem. I'm constantly talking about my brokenness. And because I thought that if I was in a relationship, with some hot chick that found me attractive and, liked having sex with me and was pretty and, was nice eye candy, like that was my list, right, of what I was looking for in a partner. And I thought, she is going to be the solution to all these problems. And so I have low self-esteem. I'm constantly treating myself like I'm broken or like I'm unworthy or all these things. And I'm in an argument with her and expecting her to win the argument of how amazing I am. So you stay in that argument. And I see this a lot where you're selling your brokenness to your partner in the hopes that they will do all this extra work to convince you of your amazingness so that you can feel better about yourself. Believe me, you are going to win that argument. They are going to say, you know what, you're right. You're right. I'm out of here. So that system never works. There's so much that you have to do how you feel about yourself, rather than having them be the solution to that problem. That's in a nutshell of how I think of this particular topic.
So sticking with you in this example, what was the first thing you did? Because there will be a hell of a lot of people, not just men, a hell of a lot of people stuck in similar traps, living lives that they're not entirely happy with. You quit your job. What did you quit your job with a plan of what to do? You wanted to, you were fascinated by the world of intimacy, and it was a huge blind spot in your life up to that point. What was your actual next steps?
Well, let me put it a different way. I might have given a slightly misleading thought here. So I'll talk about some of the pieces of the work that I did around myself that had me able to have better relationships with women. And then I'll talk about the career change because it's separate. First of all, what are all the things I don't like about myself, and what can be changed about them? So if I'm not happy with, if I know that I'm shy, are there things I can do to work on my shyness? If I have such low self-esteem, what are the actual things that I don't like about myself, and what can I do to take responsibility for fixing that? So that was one. Another is, like, so many men, I don't want to say men versus women here, because I think it's true of everybody, but so many of us have been conditioned to source our self-esteem from the love of another human being.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to go back all the way to my childhood to figure out why I place so much of my self-esteem on women. Women, like, oh my God, like if a woman is attracted to me or likes me, I'm in heaven. If she doesn't like me, I'm in a fetal position on the floor. So what is it that has had me place so much emphasis on the love of a woman as the source of how I feel about myself? So I needed to untangle that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I needed to start doing things that have me feel good about myself. And I had to actually stop. I hinted at this before, but I had to stop seeing women as a video game. I had to start seeing them as like it was. I had female friends who were willing to point out to me all the ways that I was misogynistic. And so what that means is, how I related with my friends is they're like me. They're like me. How I treated women was manipulative and not even very good at it, right? Like trying to get a thing and thinking they're dumb enough to not notice that I'm trying to get the thing.
Mm.
Like, it was really when they started reflecting back to me how I was treating them, I I felt embarrassed. I felt
So
it
you were
made me
completely blind to
cringe.
this. You had no
Completely
awareness
blind.
that you were treating people completely differently, even though you
That's
presumably
right.
worked with a similar amount of men and women in the workplace
And it
and
was,
socially. And
yeah. And as I started to see my behavior towards women, it was excruciating. And there was this period of time where I stuff would come out of my mouth that was the typical thing the way that I would relate with women, like they're caricatures of a human being, not an actual human being.
Mm.
And it would come out of my mouth, and then I would cringe. Like, I had enough awareness to know it, but I hadn't switched my behavior. Like, I would catch it after it came out of my mouth. So that was really excruciating. But slowly I started to actually change the way I were related with women. I'll say this. I was in an environment where what I learned first, this is going to sound strange and it's unusual, and I don't know that it'll apply to your audience, but for me, what I learned first was how to have good sex with a woman.
Mm.
So I learned how her body works, what feels good to her. And then I had women who enjoyed having sex with me. And I started to discover two things. One, I had been placing so much value on sex, but once I was actually getting good sex, it wasn't the solution I thought it was going to be. That's the first thing. But the second thing is, the most fulfilling part of the whole thing was the conversations that we would have after the sex,
Mm.
where she would just talk about stuff, and I would get an insight into how women feel and how they think and their experience of the world that was new to me. I realized that it was the connection that I had been hungry for all along, and that sex was the stand-in for the nutrient of connection. Like, I had always thought that if I were getting the sex, that would be the nutrient, but the nutrient wasn't the sex. The nutrient was actually the connection. So that realization in itself was life-changing.
That's massive, isn't it? It's
It's
just like
huge.
you say, you're seeing behind the curtain, and it's not
Yeah.
what you were expecting to see there.
Yeah.
But jumping back to what you said, so you went from not knowing how to have good sex to learning how to have good sex. How did you discover that? What was that transition?
Well, I mean, there's places you can go to get trained, and for a while I was doing that kind of training myself, where like the first, I basically, I took classes, and I read books, and I even early on went to a sex therapist. But over time, I kind of developed, I kind of, I don't want to say crowdsourced, but I kind of figured out my way of approaching sex that was different from my teachers, different from my mentors, different from the books that I had read. Like, it was like, if you're a jazz musician, first you emulate all the jazz greats, and then you develop your own style.
You go off script.
So there's a lot that we cis heterosexual men don't know about women's bodies and what actually feels good to them. And so to learn at a bodily level what feels good, if, like, I read this study that there's this gap between a man's willingness to have casual sex and a woman's willingness to have casual sex.
Mm-hmm.
That's not surprising. It's been known for decades. Like, you do the surveys, and the surveys say this is how many men, it's not 100%, but higher than the number of men who are willing to have casual sex and the number of women who are willing to have casual sex. So there was this one study done by the University of, I'm not going to remember what it is. But anyway, they said, let's look at the factors that play into this. And there was a bunch of different stuff that they found, but it basically fell into two categories. One is women are much more likely to want to have sex if they think the sex is actually going to be good. If the offer on the table is someone that they know is a good lover, someone who actually knows how to have this sex be pleasurable for them. One factor. The other factor is that they're not going to be slut shamed. They're not going to be shamed for liking, wanting, pursuing sex. And so those kind of turned into the two main categories. If they're not worried about how they're going to be perceived as sexual beings with a healthy libido, and if they think the sex is actually going to be good, they're more likely to say yes. And so in my coaching practice, I often have all of the focus be on her pleasure, because when she's being pleasured, he is going to get all the things that he wants, right? He's going to get the sex. It's going to be pleasurable for him if it's pleasurable for her. And so I think a lot of men don't realize the degree to which the sex they're having is better for the man than it is for the woman.
So you're saying, contrary to popular belief, men aren't just looking for the sex. They want
Right.
the nurturing and everything else that comes with it.
That's right. I found that to be true with myself, and I found it to be true with my clients, that they'll come in and they'll say, this is a typical example. A couple will come in. He'll say, I'd like to be having more sex. I'd like to be having sex more frequently. She'll say, I'd like the sex to be better. Then we'll talk a lot, because that's not a difficult goal to achieve, right? And so we could go in the direction of just improving their sex. But what happens is we get into coaching and there's all these issues between them that as those issues get resolved and they get closer, something interesting happens. Several interesting things happen. One, the sex kind of organically starts to get better. But secondly, his grip around sex starts to loosen, because he starts to actually he starts to get this nutrient of connection with her and intimacy with her that was driving that he only ever experienced in sex. And he starts to see that it's this separate thing. And so the sex gets better. It gets more frequent because she's actually getting something that feels good to her. And his kind of channeling all of his hunger and his need and his desire and everything through the channel of sex widens, because now there's these other channels of connection that are deeply nourishing to both of them, to him and to her. And he starts to realize, oh, there's this whole way of relating that I didn't realize was the thing I wanted the whole time. And I was pushing for sex because that was the way I knew how to get that thing.
So it sounds like a huge hurdle is in, like you say, a relationship, the man reframing what he's even after.
His own, yeah. Like, for me, I was like, early on, I was like, what do women want? I have no idea. What I think they want is all the things I'm not, neither of which is true. And then what I learned was that what I wanted was different from what I thought I wanted. And that was healing for me in a way that allowed me to have much healthier relationships with women.
Why do you think it seems the norm? You'll see it when you Google it, when you look at magazines, articles, TV, etc. Why is it the norm that people struggle to keep the passion alive in their relationships? You seem to have that honeymoon up streak, and then it tails off, and then it's a steady decline. Why is that the norm in most cultures that will care about these things?
I think there's a couple components to it. One is um, there's something that can happen in a relationship where something hurts your feelings or something makes you upset or there's something that you don't like. And the work of talking about it feels too, like, for whatever reason, you either choose not to say it or the work of talking it all the way through feels too heavy. But in any case, it doesn't get talked about, or it doesn't, if it does get talked about, it doesn't get resolved.
Mm.
And that puts a little bit of distance between you and your partner. It's like a patina between, that's in the way of the connection. And over time, especially like often when I'm looking at couples who have stopped having sex, they've lost their spark. They don't feel the joy and the love and the deliciousness. It's often something that didn't get talked about a while ago. So this thing that you didn't bring up with your partner, and now you are less connected. You're less connected and connectable with your partner. And so this is something I used to do. So I used to pride myself on being able to let things slide. Like, you know what? I'm a chill guy. I'm very like I can let things go. I don't hold a grudge. I prided myself on that skill until I found out from the experts. There's this group called the Gottman Institute, and they study what works in long-term relationships. And I found out that no, that's not the skill. The skill is actually bringing stuff up when it bothers you.
Mm.
Because if you bring stuff up and you talk all the way through it, like the struggle of the conversation is one thing. But once you get all the way through to the other side, you're so much closer and so much more intimate. And so the actual skill is talking about the little things that bother you. And I had to learn that skill, which is much harder than, for me anyway, than not bringing it up at all. But that's how it can be that my relationship with my partner, like we were literally just saying a couple of nights ago, we were literally just saying, I'm more in love with you than I was when we got married. She said that, and I was like, I feel the same way. I just love you more now than I did even when we got together or when we got married. Like I love you more than I ever have. And it's because we do the hard work of talking through stuff. So
Mm.
that's the first thing. This is a little bit of a long answer. The second will be much shorter, which is you start to take each other for granted and it starts to be a routine.
Mm.
That's the second one.
That was incredibly short.
Yeah.
It's just so interesting to listen to. So is part of your role when a couple presents themselves to you, is part of your role like private investigator, trying to get to the nub, trying to get them to speak honestly, communicate clearly, and then they might have to go back because it might be, like you said, if it's happened a while ago, it might not be conscious about why they're holding that grudge. It might have just built up over time, and so you have to go back into the history and get them to talk about like where is this gap, or how have you wedged this in between yourselves?
Sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. Sometimes it's just enough to have them recognize within themselves that they're seeing their partner through this lens. So if one partner is yelling at the other partner about how they left a dish on the counter, there's some history that might be behind the amount of anger that there is around the dishes that didn't get done. And so my theory is it's never about the dishes. It's never about the dishes. An argument about the dishes is never about the dishes. And that becomes a metaphor. And so I start to ask, like, help me understand. Like, part of my job is to actually see the world through each partner's eyes. So I can't even tell this person what to do until I talk to them and listen to them and ask them questions and keep trying to understand how they see the world until the way they see the world makes total sense to me. Like they're a sane, mature, intelligent adult. rather than the demon that their partner has made them out to be. And so then I can start to say, do you see that you're seeing your partner through a lens? You're actually what you're perceiving, or the story that you've got about this behavior isn't accurate.
Mm-hmm.
And they can say, so there's not seeing it at all until we get to the place where they can start to see it. That's what happened to me, right? I was describing that earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's seeing it but not being able to say why. Then there's seeing it and being able to identify why, but still being attached to it like it's true. Then there's seeing it, knowing why, and having a little bit of gap where you can be open to the possibility that it's not actually true. And you start to, the word in psychology is differentiate or individuate from that whole way of looking at things. So the story is still going, it's still loud, it's still screaming in your ear, but then there's you, and you can look at it and say, I hear you, story. I'm not going to put you in the driver's seat today. I'm going to actually, like, some languaging that I got from my wife that is just brilliant is she is fiercely protective of her high regard. So when she sees that she is at risk of turning her anger into contempt or disdain, she doesn't let that part control. She says, no, I'm going to maintain my high regard for him. Like, I'm going to be protective of my high regard for him. And I love that languaging. Like, that is, if couples can do that, then they can talk about anything. If they can maintain their high regard for each other in the process, and don't demonize the other person, don't like allow yourself to go into contempt and disdain for the other person. So that's huge right there.
So interesting how it comes full circle. So I was speaking with Bob Martin. He was a former trial lawyer and turned meditation teacher. And a lot of what we were
That's
talking
an interesting
about,
combination.
I know. Yeah, tell me about it. And yeah, it gets better from there. He used to prosecute the Miami mob, and then he flipped and he actually started working with them briefly. But yeah, so another podcast. But what we were talking about when we were talking about thoughts, one of the main takeaways for me was you have thoughts, but you are not your thoughts, and that the word you use, differentiating. And when those thoughts pop up, and you make those truths, if you choose to take them as truths, but they're just thoughts, they're not you, they're not integral to you, it's not part of your identity, they're just thoughts. And being able to identify them as, there's that thought again. It's not, like you were saying, it's not to be used against someone. It's just a thought. Why am I thinking that? But it's me thinking it. There is a separation there, and it works in relationships, but it works throughout your whole life, your waking life. You will be having these thoughts, and if you choose to believe them, you then become your thoughts. But you can just take a step back and observe your thoughts and learn from that.
Yeah. So this is bringing us back to the first question you asked, which is this thing about what would be good for you to work on within yourself, either prior to, or even if you're in a relationship, like learning this skill that you're talking about. And I know that meditation is one of the things that helps you realize that distinction between you and your thoughts. So yeah, this is a concrete example of what we're talking about. Things that you can do to grow yourself to be able to show up better in a relationship.
Showing up, that comes up a lot as well. So Professor Scott Galloway has said that your choice in a life partner is the number one defining factor of how much happiness you will experience in your life. How much do you agree with that, or do you think he's over-egging it a little bit?
It's tricky, because you have to remember that I'm a relationship coach. And what that means is that I help couples who are struggling to go from like a relation. One of the things I do, it's not always couples on the rocks. But one of the things I do is couples come to me with what they believe are insurmountable problems. And then we start to work through those problems. And then we start to work on how the relationship can be good or great or fantastic. So I do think your intimate relationship is one of the number one factors of your own life satisfaction. That certainly is the case. However, the way you phrased it, um, and so this is where the fallacy comes in, is how important is it who you choose, like finding the right partner? And because of the work that I do, I when I start working with a couple, I presume that they have chosen correctly.
Yeah, you have
And
to, don't you?
that, yeah. And so from the statistics that I've seen, in long-term relationships, it had less to do with who you chose and more to do with what you built, what the kind of relationship the two of you built. And so since my focus is so much on what can be built, like this person shows up like this person shows up like this, they're two unique human beings. They have told me that they want to have a relationship together. They don't know how the fuck to do that. They need some help. So I help them see how these two completely unique human beings, complex, quirky, unique human beings, how they can create a, a completely unique relationship never seen before on the planet, that is built around them and who they actually are, so they can be their authentic selves and have a great relationship. So I put less emphasis on who you choose. I think certainly you have to choose someone that you love. You have to choose someone that you're willing to partner with. So yeah, there's better and worse choices, but there's so much. The bulk of it is in what happens once you've chosen that person, and how you build a great relationship from that. Statistically, I used to say it's 10%, 10% is 10% who you chose and 90% what you built. And people would
Mm.
say that's ridiculous, that's exaggerated. And then I found in a survey that's it's around that much. Like in these long-term relationships, who they chose mattered about 10%, and what they did with it mattered about 90%.
Mm. So let's rewind to, say you're single and you're ready and actually looking for a full life partner. What advice would you give to someone in 2024 from your years of experience in this field?
First of all, you have to be authentic from the get-go. You like there's there's this trap you can fall into, especially if you're on the dating apps or on the dating scene. There's this tragic thing that can happen where you actually get good at dating without actually becoming good at relationship, or getting into a relationship. And so you actually have mastered the skills of being on the dating scene, what it takes to show up well in the app, what it's, how to give a good first impression on a date. Like you're developing all these skills, none of which are relationship skills,
Mm.
and also are designed to work the numbers, rather than like the alternative of you authentically being yourself, starting at like aiming for connection with the other human being right from the get-go. Like the skills of being in an intimate relationship with someone right from the get-go. Doesn't mean you necessarily sleep with them, that's not what I mean, but like person to person, human to human. So that's
Mm.
the first thing. And the second thing, I think this is the most important thing, well, at least as important as the last one. We have our lists of what we're looking for. We have our lists of what we can say about ourselves. We have our lists of like hard no's. We have our lists of things people they need to know. So what if you set all of those aside for a second? Because all of those lists are just our best guess as to the conditions that will create connection. So what if you set all those lists aside and say, here's the experiences I want to have with another human being. And the reason I say that is because you can have a rich, full life alone. You can without another human being, you could focus on going to great ski resorts and being a great skier. You could focus on like becoming a great chef, or just like you love to go to restaurants or traveling, having a beautiful home. Like you can have this amazing, the world is infinite of the experiences you can have that you can do alone. And then there's this thing of human connection. And it's this irreducible thing. And if you remember, that's the thing that you actually want. You can have your list of how they have to look. You can have their list of like they have to not smoke. You can have, but all of that is just to get to this one thing that you can't have by yourself.
Mm.
And so what I suggest is you make a list of the experiences that you want to have with another human being. I want to take walks on the beach at sunset, and I want to hold hands with another human being. It's more fun than alone. I want to wake up snuggling with someone and just holding them and talking in the morning. I want to fall asleep with them late at night. I want to have a family. I want to have a child, and I want to raise a family. I want, like, make a list of the experiences you want to have with another human being. Then find someone who wants to have those experiences. Like, match up on that.
Mm.
And then when problems arise, like the issues, like whether you're quote unquote compatible, like it's going to be based on connection. So focus on that. That's my advice.
And when people come to you, what is the most important thing that you want to see between them if you think there's hope for the relationship? Is it shared expectations of experiences? Is it values? Is it the potential for a great sex life? What is there one thing that you see in your like whether there's hope? There's hope because you've got this foundation of X.
Okay, well, so if a couple has come to me, it means they're already together.
Mm.
And for whatever reason, they want to use me as a tool to make their relationship better. Could be the relationship is bad and it's in trouble and they want to get it back into the good area. Or it could be that it's good and they want to get to great, whatever. They're coming to me because they want to use me as a tool they can use to figure out how to make the relationship better. And so there's a few things I look for. From my point of view, if they're working with me, the chances are good that the issues can be resolved. They often think that they're going to tell me something that is a deal breaker. Like, once I tell Ken how bad how the problems we're having, he's going to say, yeah, you guys need to break up. And they tell me all these problems, and then I say, okay, now I want to hear what's good about the relationship. Tell me why you chose this person. Tell me what's good about the relationship. Because as bad as it is, you're still come to a relationship coach to make it to see if you can get it going. So if you break up, it's not going to be because the bad wasn't solvable or the bad was too bad. You're going to break up because the good wasn't good enough to make it worth it. So tell me the good. And sometimes what we focus on is making the good better, so that there's a foundation to make solving the problems like worth it. Does that make sense? Like, as long as they have skin in the game, if they're saying we love each other, we fight like cats and dogs, but we love each other and we want it to work, there's a good chance we can get something to happen. If they're like, I lost the spark and I'm not sure it's worth it anymore, I don't really feel it, then we have a problem. So the main thing is the good enough to make it worth it? And are you being partnered about it, or are you being combative about it? Those are,
So you're on the same side. They're coming to you on the same side rather than coming to you like a divorce lawyer almost of like, well, she does X, Y, and Z, he does X, Y, and Z. They're on the same side of the couch and you're helping them both.
Or if they are combative, then that's the thing we need to focus on, is like, you both have the same goals. How can we do this in a way that is actually in connection with each other? How can we do this in a way that's actually partnered with each other, rather than each of you trying to fight for your like, it has to be collaborative. It has to be co-created.
And going back to the apps that you mentioned earlier, do you see pitfalls with starting on the apps, or do you think there is some legitimacy to gamifying dating and taking the pressure off that you don't, you're not out there, and when you get to a certain age, you need to find the ones, you need to go on loads of dates to do this. Is there some benefits to gamifying it a little bit to take off the edge of you might be alone for the rest of your life, and that danger, that threat that's there?
Well, so I never got good at the dating apps. It wasn't a route that I pursued. When I hear success rate, just personally, I hear maybe 10% people actually finding a partner, and I hear about 90% people getting frustrated with it. I think the dating apps really force everybody on the dating app to put their focus on some very superficial things. And so you end up swiping based on photos. And I think that a lot of the things that the dating apps focus on, even if they're talking compatibility, to me, those aren't the things that are actually going to make a relationship great. There are things that it is more in the category of things you could get good at gaming the system. We were talking about this earlier, like you can get good at the dating scene. So I don't know. I haven't heard a lot of success rate with the dating apps. I've mostly heard people say it's actually a trap. And that if you can, we're so isolated as it is. It can be hard for people to even find community these days. But if you can find people organically, that's so much better than online or on the apps.
Okay. So if we move on to, you've managed to find someone and you're moving through, to flip it slightly, going back, is there any relevance to our sort of evolution and what we used to do? Do you think our brains have now developed to move past the man's idea to spread his seed far and wide and just to keep the gene pool going? And then, like you said, the chance of someone wanting casual sex, if it's a woman, slightly less, because you can only have sex and then you have a baby once and then you've got 9 months off, and there's a danger naturally associated with that. Do you think as humans we've developed past the stage, or do you think there's still something back in our monkey mind that's saying we don't have to form these long-term relationships with people?
My experience is that we men hunger for connection. And we've been acculturated. Culture tells us a lot of falsehoods about what it is that we're actually hungry for. So there may be guys, like, there's even this belief that, like, even if you're just talking about sex alone, there's this idea that we men want variety, and so we'll have sex and then we'll get bored, and then we'll go find another partner, and then that'll be good, and then we'll get bored, and then we'll go find another partner. And so we think that what we're hungry for is variety. But the truth is that the sex that you can have with a partner that you've been with for a while far surpass the sex that you are having with someone new, because you never get a chance to actually develop rapport. Like with a partner you've been with for a while, you get to know each other's bodies, you get to know each other's tastes, you actually can develop, like, learning how to cook. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can actually learn how to cook a great meal with another human being over time and have it be better than any restaurant meal, because it's dialed into you. And so there's this huge false belief that we want variety, because we don't know how to actually create a great sex life over time with another human being. Great sex with a partner you've been for a while is vastly better than sex that you have with someone new, because it's the same experience again and again and again. You have to learn. You don't really know each other that well. It's a different experience. And I think the same is true of relationships. The boredom is our unwillingness to actually experience the depth that would lead to it being better. So I think that long-term relationships get thrown under the bus. And there's a lot there that we don't even know we're hungry for. That's my belief.
Mm. How much do we make just poor decisions? Like we go back to the, like you said, you go into the dating apps or you go into, right, okay, they've got to be so tall, they've got to have these color eyes, they've got to make this much money, etc. You look at those lists. Why are we hardwired to come to the table with those lists? Why isn't it the other way? Why do you think we make these things? And then all the things you wrote down, if the average person wrote all the things down, they inevitably rarely make that person happy. They're rarely actually what they're looking for. Or is that just the movies that I've been watching that, it's actually the quiet guy, the shy guy in the corner that they're looking for? But why do we make the wrong lists? Why do we become obsessive about facts and sizes and all the rest of it when, like you say, this connectivity, this nurturing, there's a far deeper pool that we can go into, but we choose to keep it so superficial?
Imagine that you live, and this is something I've never said on a podcast before.
Brilliant.
This is a nugget specifically for your audience.
Fantastic.
Imagine you live in a village, a small village. There's no electronics, there's no screens. You just live in a small village, like we lived for hundreds of thousands of years. And in this village, sure, there's the pretty ones. There's like 2 or 3 that are just universally acknowledged as the prettiest people, males and females in the group. And everyone, thinks they're just gorgeous. But then there's, in the course of just hanging out and being in the village and doing all the stuff that you normally do, there's this woman that, you made a funny joke and she laughed at it. And then the next time you see each other, you kind of make a subtle reference to it, and you have this kind of inside joke about this funny thing that happened where you spilled something, but now you can make a reference to it. And you start to actually develop a rapport with this other human being. And you start to experience what it's like to have chemistry with another human being and connection with another human being. So I'm describing a scenario where it's possible to start with connection.
Mm.
And then you start to find that person attractive, like after 2 or 3 little interactions, like let's say you're working at a store and she comes in to buy stuff, and the interactions you have feel good. It just feels good. And over time, you start to notice how attractive they are. They start to become attractive to you. And so that would be a scenario where we have the opportunity to start with the connection. And that is so rare in today's society. And so what we have now is isolation, isolation, isolation. And then we have social media, which is like a substitute. It's like a mimic of connection. And it's a mimic of connection that emphasizes only certain very superficial qualities. So how are we ever going to know what it's like to actually be with someone? And so what happens is, if you're so isolated all the time, your dates aren't going to go well, because the being with another human being is the unfamiliar thing that you're not good at. It's like this, and the way you think you get good at it is to put on a superficial facade that presents well, right? You're continuing the disconnection even when you're sitting across from it at dinner. And so if we flip all of that and go directly to the connection from the get-go, who is this human being? Let me be real with this human being and connect with them. It's not about likes or dislikes. They're going to walk away having had a moment of connection that maybe they haven't had before, or they haven't had in a long time. And the connection, even if there's a moment of connection that you have at dinner, that's the thing that's going to actually stay with them, not not the witty remarks you made, not, the flattery that you gave them, or this trick of like, I'm just going to only ask questions and not share anything about myself, and then they're going to come away feeling great because they did all the talking. None of that. No, I'm talking about what we're hungry to be in relationship for, which is connection. Start there and do it from the beginning. As soon as you're in a physical space with another human being, start connecting with them and see and build your relationships from there.
And is there an equality between the connection that men are seeking and that women are seeking, or are women seeking something slightly different? Or we're all looking for connection?
I think that, well, first of all we're all different and we're all very similar. So there are also vast differences between men and vast differences between women. So I don't know, it's like we're not all the same human being, but in the long run, like I have a long-term view. So in the short-term view, I think I'm just acculturated differently than women are. Like there's things about women's experience that I only have known because women were willing to share with me some of the experiences that they don't usually talk about with men. So there's differences in just how we're raised, how men and women are depicted in media that make us different. But in the long run, we're going to all want the same thing. Like 10 years in, if that's what you're shooting for, 10 years in, you want the same thing. You want the same thing.
So you're a former Apple engineer turned into international sex and intimacy educator and relationship coach. And you're now celebrating your 25th year, helping couples to co-create thriving, fulfilling, resilient life partnerships and a gourmet love life. What is a gourmet love life, and what the fuck have I been eating all these years?
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that good sex, like the analogy with food is intentional. That there's these basic biological functions: breathing, sex, eating. But breathing is boring. It's very hard to get. It's very, very hard to get anything interesting or pleasurable or memorable out of your breathing experience. But sex is more in the category of food. So if you start to actually pay attention to what feels good to your body, what feels good to your partner's body, and you treat it like an experience where you can actually pay attention, stay connected, ask questions, like have conversations. Let's say the analogy I like to give is, let's say you cook dinner with your partner a couple times a week. And so you're going to cook a nice dinner and you're going to eat it. So first you have to figure out, you like some things, don't like some things, your partner likes some things, doesn't like some things. So you're going to have to figure out how to make a meal where both of you get up from the meal being satisfied, right? So that's step one. That's not hard to do. Then, you can start to experiment. I want to learn some French cooking techniques. Oh, I bought this knife is going to actually make boning this chicken much easier. Like I want to try this seasoning that I tasted in this one meal. You start to actually experiment, and you do a lot of talking, right? You do a lot of talking about what's enjoyable about the meal. You start to get your flow in the kitchen. One of you is really good at roasting the asparagus. The other one's really good at cooking, grilling the steak. And so you can start to actually get to where a few years in, you're cooking really good meals. You're cooking meals that are better than what you can get at a restaurant. You can do that with sex. All it takes is paying attention, actually talking about what you're experiencing. Like if your head is between your partner's legs, every now and again, instead of like moaning or talking sexy, like all these nonverbal cues or trying to make it, sexy, say, what does this feel like when I do this? What does this feel like? Well, it hurts. I would never have known that doesn't feel good. I'm really glad I asked. it's a little uncomfortable. Would you like me to go a little bit to the left? Would you like me to go a little bit lighter? Would you like me to go a little bit harder? What are you experiencing? So it becomes a shared experience instead of two people masturbating their bodies on each other. It's two people actually creating a shared experience and being connected with each other. And so often what we men do that isn't that is we'll be very attentive and noticing and doing nice things for our partner until we get our genitals involved. And once there's penetration, suddenly we're all up in our own experience and we're moving towards going over the edge very quickly, right? And our partner feels left out and they get as much enjoyment from it as they are going to get. Or we want them to do something performative that's going to turn us on instead of two people actually having a shared experience that's sensual, that's full body, like my whole body is involved in this. Well, I'm experiencing what she's experiencing what I'm experiencing, and it's this loop. That to me is moving in the direction of gourmet sex. Is that helpful?
Hopefully.
Yeah.
um, and you as your role as a therapist, like you say, everyone's different. So you've got, well, depending, it doesn't matter what the relationship, you've got one person and another person, and finding their version of gourmet sex is going to be one in a million. And so does that make your job tricky, or are there certain things that you would tell every single couple that they should be doing or can be doing to get themselves on this road? You're not going to get there straight away, but to get onto the next step on the road, what do you tell people? Because like you say, it's one in a million. So you don't know what their version is going to look like, feel like, etc.
Okay, well, so let's go right to the core, which is penetrative intercourse. There's within heterosexual penetrative intercourse, two very differently configured sets of genitals rubbing on each other. These two sets of genitals like different things inherently, and we're trying to rub them together in such a way that it feels good to both sets of genitals. Okay, it sounds like penetrative sex is actually an advanced practice. It's actually, if you pay good attention and you actually want it to be good for both partners, it's trickier than you might expect. But it's no trickier than when someone comes and we're going to figure out a menu for them to eat for the dinner for the week. And one of them says, I can't eat gluten. And the other says, I love pasta. You know, it's not hard to figure out how both people can get up satisfied from the bedroom. Both of them got up completely satisfied, and neither of them had to do anything that they didn't want to do. It is entirely possible to figure that out, just like it's entirely possible to figure out how to have a meal that works for both people, is delicious for both people, and doesn't force them to eat anything they didn't want to eat.
Yeah, no, absolutely fair. How do most couples find their way to your couch? Is it, let's just go with the straight example. Is it the woman dragging the guy there? Is it the guy complaining of not enough sex, like the example that you gave earlier, and saying we have to do something? Are they ever both reluctant because somehow they've got there? They're on your couch. How do most people get there?
It's a great question. It used to be that more often it was a woman who wanted the relationship to be better, dragging the man for two reasons. One, it's often the case that a woman is more willing to want some sort of support or coaching than a man in general. And also, like my marketing, if you will, or my way of being is very, very woman centric. It's very like woman empowerment centric. And so a lot of guys don't know the degree to which I'm going to be on his side, being a stand for his desires and what he wants, and having him learn skills that he didn't know that he were going to serve him well in the relation. So he doesn't know what he doesn't know. So sometimes he comes in reluctantly, but then he learns. So that's how it used to be. It used to be mostly women who bring a reluctant man along. These days it's different. These days it's more like, because the majority of the work that I get is from word of mouth, like referrals from happy couples.
Mm.
And so usually what I hear is like, I don't know what you did with our friends over there, but they're completely transformed. Whatever you did with them, we want that. Like, can
Mm.
you do that with us? So that's usually the vibe that I get, and it's usually like both partners want it.
Oh, okay. So that's the yeah. I guess that makes perfect sense. Now, relationship wise, I've got very little advice to give people, but I've picked up some things on the way, and I just want to get your take on some of the things
Great,
that have served me well over the years, and just see what you think of them. There's one book,
great,
and well, there's a couple of books. First one, She Comes First. If you've heard of that before,
great,
yeah, a
great book.
fantastic book. If you know, you know.
Yeah,
I'll put a link in the description. The other one is called The Way of the Superior Man by David Dada. Have you ever come across this one?
I do know this one. What he teaches is very different from what I teach, and there's a lot actually that, to be honest, that I don't agree with what he teaches.
Okay.
But I understand that a lot of guys have gotten a lot out of it, and so yeah.
So one thing in that particularly, to jump into two things that he says that have actually helped me and to me to understand things when I'm in an argument or I'm just not getting on with a partner. And it's how he describes how we build our arguments, and let's call masculine energy, feminine energy, that sort of thing. And he would say that a masculine energied person builds their arguments and has their frustrations and whatever, but they do it on building blocks. And a man, let's say, will build these building blocks up to a certain point and it'll be steady and be rock solid. Whereas the female energy, it'll be more like an amorphous cloud or a storm, and the things would shoot in from different things. So it's less structural based. And what that sort of taught me, what I would get accused of regularly, is after an argument has come and we've done it, we've sort of resulted it, I will find it harder to let things go, because in my head I rationalize it that I've got these building blocks, therefore I'm right. And whereas she will just move on, and she's like, "Why are you still upset? Why are you still thinking about that? We've moved on. That's in the past." But I'm like, "I've got all these building blocks. It's here. It's solid. Like I was in the right. I'm here." But she will find it so much easier just to move on, and it's like back to zero. Not well, seemingly not annoyed at me, and just get on with her life. And I would. There's no one saying that one way is right and one way is wrong, but understanding that was quite groundbreaking for me, and as a way of thinking of, okay, I've built these blocks, but they're no different. They're no better. And I do need to somehow let this go so I can move on and get out of my own way. Do you think that, do you see that in relationships? Is that one a good snippet from the
In
book?
that sounds, I can see like how that's like super valuable to have to see this difference between you reflected in the book and kind of explained. And so I think in general, the best way that a book like that can be valuable is descriptive, meaning you read it and you saw something, you saw something within yourself that was explained well, and because you felt it described it well and helped you understand it in a different way, that it was valuable. I don't know. I would have some questions about using it prescriptively, like anyone saying that this is how the masculine should be, or you should be doing more of what this book says. Like, I think that's where it breaks down, because that gets in the way of actually building a relationship based on authenticity. And I also would say there's a lot of times where I can see those differences, and there'll be a man who's operating the way you're describing, and sometimes my answer is, it would be helpful for you to actually learn some of the skills that she's good at, because it would actually serve you here. Some of the skills, like, not all of the skills that we as men have been trained to be good at are the right skills for a relationship, like our rationality. Sometimes we can throw out feeling in the name of rationality, or we think we've won the argument because we're rational, and we use that to discount what our partner is saying, or the emotions that are involved. So sometimes what I do is end up saying, you actually need to learn more of the skills that your partner has so that the relationship is more well-rounded. So that's a thing that happens sometimes too.
No, I fully appreciate that it's something that I need to work on, and that no one's perfect. But just hearing it like that, it did help me realize where I was falling down and why I was still holding on to something hours later when I should
Beautiful.
I should learn to let it go.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, that's how it should. That's probably the best use of a book like that is
Mm.
I see myself. This makes total sense.
Yeah, exactly. And another one which stuck with me, I only took, I think, a couple of snippets from the book, but the other one was when you're in the midst of an argument and a struggle, just to put your ego aside. And I find that incredibly difficult, to just put my ego aside and go over and give her a hug and show her love, when it's just so easy just to be cold and turn my back and walk away and just not do that. And just seeing that in myself reflected in the book, of like, just get over yourself, and you're arguing, but you love each other before this, you love each other during, you love each other afterwards, and just get out of your own way. You know the right thing to do here, and just put pride aside, whatever you want to call it, ego, and just give her a hug and just show that, like, this is just a little fight. It really doesn't matter in the long scheme of things. Again, he might not have written it like that in the book, but that's what I took from it, and that's how I saw myself. What do you think of that one?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It goes along with what I was saying earlier about being partnered in your disagreements rather than like combative or competitive, actually, or like you said, like having it be about it's important that I end up being right in order to save face or look good, rather than no, we're actually together trying to figure out what the best thing is, and sometimes it's not going to be the one that I've been fighting for so hard. It's going to be the one that she's been suggesting. And so yeah, it sounds like choosing to be partnered in it rather than uh in a boxing ring about it.
Yeah, no, I like the way you phrase that. Um, Another one came from Ben Shapiro. I think he was on a round table, and one of his nuggets of advice was, when your partner comes to you with a problem, to ask the question: is this a problem you want solved, or is this a problem you just want to vent and I'm just to sit here and listen? And that when I always stop her when she said, I've got something to talk about, I'll stop and say, which one is this? And she'll thank me and say, no, thanks. I literally just want to vent. I don't want you to try and solve my problems for me and be a man and do what we naturally just try and do. Just sit back, listen to it, tell me that sucks, and then that's what I'm looking for in this instance. Or maybe it is, no, I actually need this thing solved for me. That has served me incredibly well, and just
Yeah, yeah,
integrating that
yeah.
into what we do is brilliant.
Super valuable skill. Super valuable skill. And I love the phrasing of that question.
Mm, yeah, good old Ben Shapiro. What makes a relationship feel like work versus flow?
There's this idea that we are in relationship to get our needs met.
Mm,
And that sounds totally reasonable. Sure, what else could it be? But I don't actually subscribe to that. And what happens is if you're in relationship to get your needs met, what happens is you end up being transactional. I'm going to do the things that I'm going to do this and this and this in order to get that and that and that, down the road.
mm,
And so there's a lot of what's called extrinsic motivation, meaning if I'm doing this to get something that I want later, or I'm doing this to avoid something bad happening, um, as opposed to what's called intrinsic motivation, which is you're doing something that you actually enjoy doing. So, for example, if you're a skateboarder and you're riding your skateboard and you're working at it, right? Like you're trying to do this trick, you're trying to do this jump, and you're on your skateboard and you fall and it hurts, and you get up and you go up and you fall and it hurts, and it looks like work, but the truth is that you're doing something that is intrinsic motivation. It's something you enjoy doing. At the end of the day, the truth is you enjoyed the whole thing. And so people can be in relationship but not really enjoy relationship. They're there to get the reward. And so they spend a lot of time in like they're not actually in it to enjoy it. They're in it to get something. And so that's when it actually feels like work. Like you go to a job, you're not expecting to enjoy the job. You're there to do something. You're going to get paid at the end, and it's work. It feels like work because it is work.
Mm.
Versus, no, relationship is my jam. Like, yeah, there's hard stuff I do, just like if I was a skateboarder. I mean, there may be a day where I got bruised up or I fell or I wasn't able to do the trick. But I enjoyed the whole day. And so you can have that feeling with a relationship too. That's how I feel. Like whether we're struggling, whether we're arguing, whether we're, having a great day, like at the end of the day, the truth is, wow, I enjoyed every minute of it. Like relationship is my jam. And so it never feels like work to me. It never feels like work to us.
So if people are in a relationship now and it does feel like work, are you saying it's a reframe that you're coming at it from the wrong angle? Or is there another way to fix it?
It could be like if you're aware, like when I talk to people about this, sometimes they become aware they like the benefits of relationship, but they don't actually like relationship. And when they realize that, that changes the game. And usually someone who is transactional that way, usually they pick someone else who also is transactional. And so it's going to feel like work because it is work and you're going to get the reward. And so what you do in that situation is you have a clear conversation with your partner about the ROA. Here's the things I do to make the relationship work. Here's the things I enjoy and that I want. And when I'm not getting these things, I'm going to feel upset and ripped off. And you work out a clear, like what your ROI is, what your partner's ROI is. And if you get those things dialed in, then you're both going to be happy in the relationship. But it is going to feel like work because it is work.
Mm.
But the other thing that can happen if you have this realization is you can say, how is it that I like the perks of relationship, but I don't actually like relationship? What would it take for me to actually, the process of being in relationship? How can I be like, sometimes it's this thing of like arguing combatively versus being partnered when you argue, right? Like holding high regard for your partner so that you can always feel that you love each other, even when you're in a heated disagreement. Little things like that make it so that it's actually enjoyable throughout.
And how does this relate to having a generative relationship? Is this different? Is it when it's draining you, when it's pulling from you, rather than nourishing you both in equal measure?
Right. So this is a great question. So you're always putting energy, spending energy, putting energy into the relationship, and you're always getting energy from the relationship. And that balance is going to determine whether you feel like the relationship is worth it or not. And so there can be this place where if you do something nice for your partner that doesn't cost you much but is a big deal to your partner, you've actually generated more in the relationship than what it's cost you. And so it can be helpful to look for those little things you can do that aren't too hard for you to do. They're not that big a deal. They don't cost you much, but it's huge for your partner. And have your partner know little things they can do for you aren't too costly for them, but are a huge thing for you. So for example, if you're sometimes a couple will be arguing and finally when all is said and done, he says, I just want to be appreciated for the stuff that I'm doing. If you could express appreciation, that would mean the world to me. It's such a small thing that would pay such a big dividend. And the more you can find in your relationship, little things you can do for your partner that will make a big deal, that will make a big difference for them, and little things they can do for you that make a big difference, the more your relationship is that word that you said, which is generative, where what you're getting, what you're both getting out of the relationship is more than what you're putting in. It's not a zero sum game. It's not trying to get the most by putting in the least. It's actually uh, the relationship is generating more than what it's costing you, and that's when it becomes amazing.
That's such a nice and natural way that you've just phrased it, and being open and honest enough and having that level of communication where you can say, look, if you could
Yeah,
just do this little thing, it's going to make the world of difference to me. And what can I, and just equally just asking that question of another person, what can I do? What's the things that I can do that will just make the world of difference to you? And if you're not doing it and you've never had that conversation, or you're just blind to it, how much more love that could bring in, of like, oh look, we're doing things for each other on a regular basis, and we're in it for each other. We're not just, like you say, we're not just in it to get as much as we can by putting the least amount in.
exactly.
So good. So just before we go into the quick fire game, are there any other tips? I'm sure there'll be a lot of people listening to this to hear more tips and advice and things about how to improve that love life, that sex life, let's say, that has dipped in their life, and they feel like there's no way to get it back. Is it booking in sessions with a sex counselor? Is it buying the right books? Is it what's the first few steps that people can do if they're listening to this and their sex life isn't gourmet?
Ask each other questions. Like, get curious about your partner. How, like, there's nothing I can teach you, nothing a book can teach you, nothing a guru can teach you, nothing you can see on YouTube or anywhere that's going to substitute for what you can find out from your partner. So, for example, you can say, well, what do you want more of? You can say, can we spend some time in bed just exploring to see what feels good to your body, what feels good to my body? You can, like, just have a conversation, have a real honest conversation with your partner where you say all the things that you're thinking, like all the questions you have about your partner, all the things you don't know are valid things you can actually ask them. It's so funny. Like, it's funny. Like, I have clients who say, it's like, I wonder if my partner blah blah blah, and I say, well, have you asked them? And they're like, you can do that, and I'm like, yeah, you can do that. So if nothing else, when you go to bed, before you go to sleep, say to your partner, what haven't you told me? And they might say nothing. They might say nothing for a week, and then one day they'll say, oh, I didn't tell you about this thing that you said that really hurt my feelings. Or could be something small like that, or could be, I haven't told you that I'm not enjoying sex with you as much as, like, I kind of put on a show for you because I know you like it, but I'm not actually enjoying it. But just saying, what haven't you told me, and letting it be open for them to say anything can be super powerful.
How do you learn to receive that information? Because there's got to be times where you're hearing things which not only they're always meant in the best intentions, I'm sure, but you've also got to receive that information in an adult, mature fashion, and
Yeah.
not hold something in yourself. How would you, what would you tell people to do to become,
Yeah.
to be able to listen to what you're actually hearing?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because that is the other part of the equation, is how, like, if you want an honest partner, then how you receive what they say to you is everything. So there's two things. One is you can be 49% triggered or upset, or like your ego stings, or you're like angry that they didn't tell you earlier, or you can be 49% triggered, but you have to be 51%. I'm really glad that you told me that. Thank you. It must have taken a lot of trust and courage to say that. It's kind of upsetting to me to hear it. It's probably not surprising to hear that I didn't enjoy hearing it, but I'm so glad that you told me. If you can be 51% rewarding them for the honesty, then you get to be 49% having your feelings about the thing that they said. And in this exercise, here's my suggestion. In this exercise, the purpose of the exercise where you say, what haven't you told me? The purpose of the exercise is its whole purpose is to cultivate communication on stuff that you haven't been talking about. So whatever they say, no matter what it is, I don't care if they said, I'm having an affair. I don't care what it is. The first thing you say is, thank you for telling me. Then you say, is there anything, let's say it's something like, I haven't been enjoying the sex that we've been having, and I haven't told you that I haven't been enjoying the sex that we've been having. First you say thank you for telling me. Then you say, is there a request that you have? And they might say, yeah, I would like it if you would slow down a little bit, or whatever the request is. Then only after that can you start to talk about your own feelings. Because first and foremost, you have to actually make it safe to have the conversation. Then you can talk about, oh man, it was such an ego blow when you said, like, you're telling me this whole time, like, some of your orgasms have been faked. Oh God, I feel so, like, whatever it is that you're feeling, do you know what I mean? But you have to reward the communication more, like, first and foremost, so that you're not punishing them for communicating.
So you're opening that door and leaving it open rather than slamming it shut and, right, well, we're not going to do this again because I've reacted terribly.
Right. And you even get to say, there might be times when you say, that I'm so triggered by what you said, that's more than I can handle. I have to take a break for a minute or whatever. Do you know what I mean? But the only way to get the relationship to be better is to talk about it. Like my wife and I talk about everything. There's nothing that is so emotionally charged that we can't talk about it. And that is, again, another skill to get good at, so that your relationship can be what it has the potential to be. Is if there's a topic that's emotionally charged, it needs to be a topic that you're capable of talking about.
Ken, this has been fantastic. So interesting. I can't wait to watch this back and just take, all the nuggets of wisdom that you've gone into. I can't wait. We'll jump into the quick fire round now, if that's okay, and then I'll give you a chance to say if there's anything you haven't said. But having said that, there's no book or podcast or YouTube video that can teach you something you can't find out by asking the person. What book or podcast would you give someone if they wanted to live a good life?
There's two that I'm going to recommend. One is a book called Unproblem Your Problem.
Okay. What's that one about?
By Ana Del Castillo. She's really amazing at having you break down where we create problems and then point out into the world saying the world is causing problems. But she's really good at having you learn where you're responsible, and what happens is you actually start to get agency in creating, unprobleming your problem. So the book is called Unproblem Your Problem.
Brilliant. And what was the second one?
The other book is called Unbound. It's by Kasia Urbaniak. It's a really good book about power dynamics in relationships, especially from a woman's point of view. I learned a ton from it.
Okay, fantastic. What was your light bulb moment where you learned something about yourself?
But it was, this is a funny one, but I was hanging out with my now wife. We were just dating at the time, and a good friend of mine. We were just hanging out, and I said, "Yeah, I'm an easygoing guy," and they were like, "No, you're not." And I honestly, genuinely thought I was an easy, like I thought it was a foregone conclusion that I was known to be an easygoing guy. So to hear them both say, dude, you are not easygoing at all, was a super big wake up call for me. Like
Really?
I had to rewire so much of my beliefs about myself in order to accommodate these two people whose opinions I trust, telling me, dude, you are not easygoing.
You're
So
not as laid back
that
as
was
you
a
think you
learning
are.
experience. Yeah,
Really? Okay. Of all the skills you've learned, which one do you value as the most important?
probably emotional regulation. Like
What does that mean?
to to be able to be to be able to have the full range of emotions, like to experience them, to express them, but not have them be so destabilizing that they run my behavior.
And out of
To
interest,
have,
what age did you get good at that?
I mean, I'm still getting better at it, but I would say probably in my 40s, I started to really get a handle on it.
What's been your best mistake?
Best mistake. That's a hard one to think of. Not that I don't make mistakes, but I don't know. I'm drawing a blank. I will text you at 4 a.m. when I remember.
You'll wake up in a sweat,
Oh,
cold
this
sweat.
one. Can we
This
get
was
this
what it
one in?
was. Yes, I knew it. What? Well, speaking of that, what keeps you up at night?
Um, the balance between the transactionality of needing to make money and the rewarding work of helping other people and the work that I want to do in the world, and having both of those be aligned instead of at odds with each other.
So, just to dig into that a little bit, are you saying is there a slight guilt that you're getting paid to do what you genuinely enjoy doing, and there is a financial reward with it, where you in some theories you just do it for free if that were a possibility?
It's more like it's more like what I was saying earlier about how I related with women. When I treated them like a video game and I was like, what's the sequence of events that I need to do to get the reward? Rather than actual connection with another human being and how rich and amazing this other human being in front of me is, and just the richness of being connected with another human being. That there's a way in which I'm learning how to not treat my business as the video game where I do the moves and get the cash,
Mm.
but have it be this deeper thing that I'm already good at, right? Like I'm already good at the work of helping other people have more connection, but not to let that get thrown under the bus with all the flashy new ways to turn it into a money making thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I hear that.
Okay. Yeah.
If someone wanted to take one step towards living a good life, what would you tell them to do first?
Ask somebody important in your life, what haven't you told me?
So good. I like that. And finally, who should we talk to next if we want to learn how to live a good life?
I think it would be great for you to have a conversation with Ana del Castillo.
Mm.
And I can get you in touch with her.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. The author of the book that I mentioned.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I need to download that book immediately.
Great.
Fantastic. Oh, I've got details. Ken Blackman, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast today. Is there anything else that you want to leave the listeners with before we sign off?
No, you ask really good questions. Keep listening to this podcast because I can tell just from this interview that you're going to get a lot of information from any of the podcasts that this guy does.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And for anyone that wants to follow you and maybe even do a session with you, what's the next steps to get in touch, and how do people find you online, etc.?
Yeah. To find out about working with me, go to kenblackman.com. To read more of like A lot of the stuff that we talked about, I've written a blog about, and so you can go into more detail on a lot of the stuff that we talked about today. Go to kenblackman.medium.com, which is where my blog is.
And do you do virtual sessions with couples?
Yeah, everything that I do is on Zoom these days. So, yeah.
Fascinating. Ken, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for watching all the way to the end. As you've made it this far, please do give it a like before you leave and consider subscribing if you haven't already, and we will see you in the next one. Cheers.